good morning or good afternoon, depends the place you are in this moment. I am happy to welcome you in this first talk, Return to the Source. And we are happy to meet you in Assumption, in an international meeting of Assumption. It is the fourth meeting. The first one was in French, the second in Spanish, and we had also yesterday a meeting in English. As you well know, after this conference, after this talk, you can also join our meeting by Zoom to have a time of international sharing and to discover the other participants to this sharing. The theme of our talk today will be the foundation of Auteuil and what this foundation tells us about the charism of Assumption. In fact, it is an opportunity to go back to our sources and to find our identity. First, we have to see that the decision of the Assumption community to move to Auteuil marks an historic step for the congregation. In fact, after moving from apartment to apartment, from Rue Ferrou to Rue de Vaugirard, then from house to house, from Impasse des Vignes to Chaillot, the parish and community was set to establish itself for a long period of time in Auteuil. What marks the first foundations, the life in this first house I was speaking about, Rue Ferrou, Rue de Vaugirard, Impasse des Vignes and Chaillot, as we know, what marks them is the poverty, the space shared with the pupils, who in general receive the best share, the least cold or the most beautiful rooms. Often, the sisters, in their telling, specify that the best is given to the children, which expresses, in a certain way, the gift of themselves for the young girls under their care. Physically moving around from a place to place is a sign of an internal movement in the congregation. The sisters, in the moment where they are looking for a new place, are still searching for the right path, for the right way. And Marie Eugénie still struggles to express the goal as she sees it, as she understands it, especially to make it acceptable for priests, for society. In fact, for her, as for Assumption, nothing is certain at that time. The renown of the Assumption is still to be established, and the first students don't come soon enough. But when finally they come, at the Impasse des Vignes first and then at Chaillot, the boarding school was increasing in number. And the number of sisters as well was increasing. In the years 1849, 1850, there will be the first foundations abroad. Cape Town in South Africa first, and then Richmond in England. And then in 1854, 1855, the foundations in France of Sedan and Nîmes. So we will have soon 4, 5, and then 6, 7 more communities. The monastery of Chaillot, in this context, near the Champs-Élysées, nice place, where the community had been since 1845, became too small. And if you want to see this monastery, here we have a drawing of this monastery of Chaillot that the sisters were living in this moment. Nice place, but small place, even if it seems big in these pictures, in this drawing. And so the sisters were looking for a new location, a new place where they could unfold, live Assumption life in all its dimensions. We can say that there were three important points in their search. First, they were searching for a need for a regular life, regular religious life, like a place for a monastery in the countryside, where silence could reign, with open spaces to a contemplative and austere life. Second, they were looking for space for the education of young girls, a place where they can learn to direct their flight, the students. As you know, Marie-Eugénie was loving the student and she was speaking about them like butterflies who were flying, everyone with his own color. Third, they were searching for a place to ensure unity and communion, like a source place for the congregation, where there could be congregational meetings at a time when it was beginning to expand outside of Paris. And here we are. We have three important dimensions of Assumption life: contemplative life, education, and communion, community. For obvious financial reasons, the Chaillot monastery had to be sold before considering the purchase of another property. In March 1855, the search for a property became a reality because Marie-Eugénie learned that the Empress had just bought for her sister the hotel, means the house of Madame de Lauriston. And this house was near Assumption House in Chaillot. And Marie-Eugénie was thinking that if the Empress would buy this land, she also would buy our land to have a bigger piece of land for her sister. And so she began to think of a new place for Assumption, saying, if we have this money, we can get a new one for half of the price, perhaps. Initially, Marie-Eugénie considered another property at Chaillot, in the same area, near the Champs-Élysées. But the transactions progressed less quickly than expected, and finally, she chose a new location. A magnificent property surrounded by woods, orchards, villas hidden in the trees, for a modest price. This property you have it here in my back. This is the old property of Auteuil, called the Château de la Tuilerie. So called because of the tile factory that was established there in ancient times. In fact, in the 15th century, this place became then a hunting lodge, and then a chateau that later belonged to prestigious families. In the fall of 1855, Marie-Eugénie signed the final contract for the sale of Chaillot and the purchase of the Tuileries. And the construction work is to begin. On this large property, there was only one building, the small chateau, with its tower. Difficult to install nuns there. The project was therefore to put the boarding school in the chateau and to have an adjacent monastery built for the community and the novitiate. And the project of Marie Eugénie was very big. I will show it now. She wanted to build this monastery. A monastery with 4 wings of construction. As you see in the drawings, in the middle of the wood with trees around. In fact, at this moment, this place was really in the wood near Paris, but a really rural area. But the installation in this place had a financial impact on the young congregation, which had to save money for a long time then. And the sisters were always very careful about expenses. Marie Eugénie is really proud of all the savings, all the small savings she can do. And in that sense, she will even give up the construction of 2 wings of the monastery in order to give priority to the development of the boarding school. She writes to Father d'Alzon, "The chateau is well built, but it is almost impossible to install the boarding school there. So the boarding school would have to be built separately, and we must begin first with setting the community. It will be a pity for us not to build the regular cloister that we have sighed for so long. And yet, I do not see a remedy for that." So they will first begin building the school, and then these 2 wings of the monastery instead of the 4 they wanted to build. In addition to this development, the phase of major works can begin. In March 1856, the foundations of the new monastery were dug. And it was quite a discernment to choose the healthiest location in the property. Auteuil was the first monastery whose construction Marie Eugénie was to direct. It is the first of a long series. In fact, the archives are filled with plans of different places where Marie Eugénie is going to build. And we can find these projects, these annotations of Marie Eugénie, the letters to the architects, the comments in the letters of Father d'Alzon or the sisters. In Auteuil, in April 1856, the first stone was laid. And you have here the scroll where there is a memory of this event. And also all the names of the sisters and the pupils, the students who were here for this event. From the exterior to the interior, we can say that Marie Eugénie leaves nothing to chance. As with everything she does, she is inspired by other congregations. She visits other places. She takes the best of what exists outside and adds her personal touch. She studies the plans, even to the detail of the shape of the stones and sculptures. In fact, the archives in the Mother House contain plans of the very beginnings, drawings of columns and cornices. And you can see here the document on which Marie Eugénie worked. We can almost look at these documents and imagine that Marie-Eugénie is beside us, that she's commenting with the architect Verdier, with Father Dalzon or Mother Thérèse Emmanuel, who took over the supervision of the work when the young superior was away from Paris. She even proposed the design of the massif or the drainage plan of the lawns. And she would put Father Dalzon, the founder of Assumptionists, at work. She invited him to come to Auteuil for a rest, which he will do for a few months. And she writes to him, "Perhaps you will be able to gather together your first novices there and take a rest while having trees cut down and watching over the buildings and the garden, for which we will be very grateful." Father Dalzon will come for some months before the inauguration of Auteuil during the construction, and upon his arrival, he was therefore appointed supervisor of the work. Unsettled in, on the days when Marie-Eugénie did not come or when she left Paris, he would write to give news. He took great care of the garden. But when Marie-Eugénie was away, he sometimes feared that his arrangements would not please the foundress. We see here the character of Marie-Eugénie, her determination, and also the obedience of Father Dalzon. In any case, he loves the place, as some of his letters testify. He says one day to a sister, "The Tuileries is readied every day to receive its future inhabitants. It will be a beautiful day, almost too beautiful. What treasures of wisdom will be enclosed in these cells, where a little holy poverty will, however, reign." So, something very beautiful, but at the same time, something very simple. At the same time, Marie-Eugénie had a very strong ecological concern. To build this property as it is at the end, I will show you now what has been realized. The two wings, you can see them very well, and the chateau. In this property, to build, they had to cut down trees. But Marie-Eugénie took care of them throughout the construction period. One day, Father Dalzon wrote to her, "Before you leave, I want to point out a fact that I noticed last night. Mr. Demion cut down yesterday the trees at the end of the woods that you did not want him to touch. You might have to give some instructions on this. Take care of the trees." It is really a concern of Marie-Eugénie, not cut down too many trees. A few days later, Father Dalzon writes to Marie-Eugénie, "We are preparing the yard. We are maintaining the trees that will protect you on the side of the street. We haven't even touched the others yet, but we may have to make a decision on a few that will make the place too humid, or that will prevent the new building from drying well." Really, cutting down a tree is never an insignificant decision for Father Dalzon and Marie-Eugénie. And Marie-Eugénie wants to avoid doing it as much as possible. Thus, in the course of later arrangements, she advised Thérèse Emmanuel to send a sister, she says, who cares about trees, to verify if it is really necessary to cut down those of which Sister Marie-Marthe was speaking before. I want to do everything possible, and yet it is also necessary to cut down what is an obstacle. Discernment to cut the trees. In many letters, Marie-Eugénie is concerned about the fate of the trees, and she will share it. She writes one day, I thank you for having the lawn cleared up, and I find that the reasons you give for continuing are excellent. But would you tell Jacques, the gardener, not to cut any more trees before my return? Yes, Marie-Eugénie really inspires us with an ecological concern. And this will be found in many other houses, as we can see in many other letters. In one of these letters, we even find the list of some trees that she likes. So I will give you this list in case you have these trees in the garden. So when you will see these trees, you will remember Marie-Eugénie. There are other lists, to tell the truth, but I have chosen one. She advised to put St. Lucia cherry trees, acacias, sycamores, fake ebony trees, lilacs to grow under them. Imagine that she is also thinking of which tree is going with which other tree, just like we are doing now in our new way of gardening, to put a plant that is growing better near another plant. In fact, she's looking for sheep trees that can grow easily. Sheep trees that can grow easily. Well, with everything I have said, I think you feel the will and the desire to have a walk in this garden. And you know, thanks to a sister or a student, we don't know exactly, we have in the archives many drawings, particularly a series of short drawings. I will show you them now, and you will be able to have a walk in this garden of Auteuil in the time of Marie-Eugénie. And while we are walking in the garden, we can give thanks for this student or this sister who made these drawings for generations. We can also imagine the students playing, the sisters praying, sharing. So Auteuil was this place of space for contemplation. And this place was built, we can say, between tradition and modernity. We have an old review of architecture of this time where it is written. Listen to that, because the person who wrote that didn't really know Assumption, but it says something very true. It is written, Auteuil is not a monastery in the technical strictness of the word. It is not a convent, nor a congregation, nor a college, nor a boarding school. It is all of these things at the same time. And in fact, it says something about Assumption. If you think of it, Assumption is not only a monastery, it's not only a convent, it's not only a college, a school, a boarding school. It is all these things at the same time. What is written in this review says something about unity of life in Assumption. All these things are linked among themselves. And can you imagine that Marie Eugénie takes opportunity of everything? In this chateau, what became the chapel was the room where before there were the receptions, where people were dancing, where people were having fun together. This place became the chapel. Of this chapel, not a lot of things remained, but we could build the windows, the stained glasses, with some pieces that had been found. So, in the chateau, the room for reception transformed in chapel. The salon, where Napoleon once liked to come, became a large parlor. And even if it had been necessary to limit Marie Eugénie projects because she only made these 2 wings, well, the place was imposing, and the cloisters kept the very pure lines of Gothic architecture. And it is written in the review that the sisters gave the long cell corridors, the refectory, the community room, and the chapter room that religious aspect which left the soul with a deep impression. At the entrance, you could see a vast doubled ramp porch that rises up from the ground below the garden to the vestibule. And then, according to the plans that we have, we can also know what you can find. Here are the first plans that were made of the chateau to see where are the things. So, if we go through the door of this porch, you can put your hands on the modern heating system to warm them up. Because in this review, we can also find that in Auteuil, there was the more modern heating system in Paris at that time. In fact, Marie-Eugénie knows everything about heating system. She knows the names, the prices, the possibilities, the advantages and disadvantages. Well, Marie-Eugénie is a practical woman. And from the architecture that was sign of these contemplative Gothic lines to the heating system that is sign of a modern arrangement, we can see that Auteuil is really built between tradition and modernity. I think now, as we have been in the garden, you want to enter in the house. You can enter in this house through other pictures that we have. And you will discover that the first place interesting is the refectory. In this refectory of old convent, you see something very specific here, like beams and iron joists, all visible in the middle of the earthenware floors. And we can call them Eiffel style. In fact, this Eiffel style was in vogue at the time. You know, the one who came to Paris, you recognize. It seems like Eiffel Tower. It is exactly the same process that has been used for Eiffel Tower. You have also the same in Lübeck, in our school in Lübeck. The last in vogue style at the time. And at the same time, Marie-Eugénie was always looking for simplicity and style. So, modernity, tradition, simplicity. Let's go in this house. Just go in the cloister from outside. And then we will find all the frescoes painted by a sister in the cloister. They say the life of Mary, the Holy Virgin. So the sisters, when they were going to pray, when they are going to eat or sleep, they could contemplate this mystery of the life of Mary. We can also give thanks to this sister who painted these frescoes. Auteuil Monastery was inaugurated in August 10th, 1857. And therefore, daily life was organized. Another construction was built in 1866 at the other side of the park, the convent of the Immaculate Conception. In fact, this convent, built 10 years after, is a convent where we are now, where we currently live in. What was this daily life in Auteuil? I have said it before. In Auteuil, daily life crisscrosses the threads of community life and the life of the students. Here you have one of the first lists of the students of the school. The day where they entered, the day where they left. It was an official list for the ministry. In some small leaflet that were more or less the same for all the Assumption House at that time, we can discover what is the aim of education in Auteuil. In this leaflet, you can find that the aim is to provide an education that offers all the educational development that the customs of the world demand today of young girls, with all the guarantees that religious education offers. Demand of the world, religious education. It is also said that it is a question of combining solid studies with a profoundly Christian direction, with a unity of plan and spirit. In fact, the sisters teach everything, even science and foreign languages. And we still have a few microscopes left, witnesses of these courses of science. And it is said that the sisters, teachers, continue to study all the time to ensure a high intellectual level. The study is part of our Assumption life, this continued study. And the sisters who are teaching languages are native speakers. And can you imagine foreign students receive grammar and literature classes in their native language? We have here the beginning of a personalized studies that respect the roots of the students. But at the heart of the studies is education. In fact, to enlighten the minds of young people in order to attach their will to the good, to strengthen their faith, to make their minds as Christian as their hearts, to prepare them for the duties of the world, there is education. The number of students is limited, and it allows the students to be looked after like a mother looks after her children. The sisters want also to unfold simplicity of taste and habit. And the needlework, which is intended for the poor, is taught once a week for the poor. We can make a link with all our works of needlework today. In synthesis, vigilance, solicitude, maternal tenderness are signs of the relationship between the sisters, the teachers, and the students. Then, celebrating festive spirit is also part of life in Auteuil. It brings together the sisters and children, young and older students. And we have so many examples which have been copied as a remembrance of this feast. Here we have, for example, the leaflet for Assumption Feast in 1864. It was actually the 25th anniversary of the foundation. And this leaflet begins like this. It speaks about a bond among us, a bond among the sisters and the students. And this bond is a bond of charity. And it says, a charity that we have drawn from your heart, Christ. This feast in Auteuil are the sign of unity and charity drawn from Christ. They celebrate the love that we receive from Christ, one for one another. Sure, Assumption Feast is a very big feast, but we can also find Feast of the Holy Name of Jesus that is also celebrated, and St. Catherine's Day. Each feast is organized jointly by the students and the sisters. And we can see it, for example, in this invitation for a St. Catherine feast written by the students. It's like an invitation from the elder students for the younger one. In this leaflet, in this invitation, we can read that the feast of Saint Catherine of Alexandria has always been part of the tradition of the Assumption, a day of joy and recreation. And it is written that the priority is to enjoy yourself with all your heart. It is also written that before the feast, it is necessary to guard against any difficulties that might arise and that would prevent the expansion of your joy. The students write that after conferring with their venerable sisters, the class mistresses, and the other mothers in charge of education, they have ordered some decisions. The first decision is that they will celebrate 2 masses on that day, that there will be silence in the dormitory before the feast to prepare themselves well for this feast, that they will eat a good meal to gain strength. And there is a precision that they can run in the alleys of the garden, but not on the lawns, exactly like now. In this dimension of responsibility, the students are given very precise roles. And they say, for example, we entrust Anne-Marie Bladinière, it's one of the students, and another one, to maintain joy among their companions and to revive the enthusiasm if it is in danger of diminishing. And it is written, as their motto, tomorrow must be as cheerful as a finch. We give them, to these 2 girls in charge of joy, one of these little birds that they will wear as decoration all day long. Other students are megaphones or artists. It depends on their competence. In fact, we recognize words that we really well know in Assumption in the 21st century. Joy, talents, initiative of the students, respect. There is really a form of co-responsibility. And for example, we can see it in the organization of what the sisters call Enfants de Marie, Children of Mary, which will be a religious organization where the children, the students, are admitted by vote. And who is voting? The children and the sisters. We have in the archives the list of the votes of the vote, the list. Jubilees, anniversaries are also celebrated. And it is always an opportunity to recognize and give thanks for the qualities of a person. As witnessed by this celebration for a sister in charge of infirmary, for example, and what is written says that she looks at all kinds of illnesses with tender compassion. So feast is an opportunity to celebrate God's presence in every person, in every event. Here are some pictures of the daily life in Auteuil. I was saying at the beginning that Auteuil was also supposed to be a place for communion. And that's true that in this place in 1858 was held the first general chapter of the congregation. In this chapter, Marie Eugénie was elected superior for life. Unity is thus built around Christ, first of all, then around her, Marie Eugénie, and the first sisters who accompanied her, and around Auteuil, which has become the mother house, the source of the congregation. It is in Auteuil that the sisters will now come to recharge their batteries, to make their summer retreats, for example, to come for a chapter, a general chapter, and later on for sessions, for third year. And in this Auteuil of the 19th century, means of communication and created small newsletters, news from the different communities. They were called Echo of Auteuil. And another was the radoteur, means in French, someone who says anything that comes in his mind, or who repeats a lot the things. And this Echo d'Auteuil had a motto. The motto was in Latin, aut loqui aut mori, speak or die. The price of the subscription is counted in prayers. A dozen rosaries for the missionaries of New Caledonia, for example, in 1873, where the foundation was going on. Here are this small leaflet. There were drawings, funny stories, sometimes announcements. Some events of the daily life. And also sometimes new foundation, as for example here, Nîmes and Sedan. These small newsletters are like examples of the desire of communion. We could believe that in this beautiful monastery, life is preserved and Auteuil is out of the world. But it is not at all the case. World events have a strong impact on the life of Auteuil. Here is one example. The siege of Paris in 1870. We can find it in the annals of Auteuil community. In fact, in 1870, France was at war with Prussia, and France will lose this war. A chaos will follow within the country, especially in Paris, which will lead to the proclamation of the Third Republic. The annals of the community, like a newspaper of that time, recount the dramatic events that the commitment of the sisters. Because the sisters were committed. In August 1870, a large number among them had to leave Auteuil almost overnight to find a secure place. Thérèse Emmanuel was among the first to leave the monastery. And one sister will write to her after she leaves, "What a hard time, dear mother. Those who flee feel so sorry for those who remain. Those who remain have their worries. However, it is the hand of God that juggles us in this way, and we must adhere to Him." We can see that these sisters, in all the events, even the more difficult events that they have to face, they recognize that the hand of God is with them, and that the unique way, one of the way, is to be with Him. I think that for them, another way is to be in communion with their people. In fact, Auteuil became like a military hospital, not exactly like that. In France, we say ambulance militaire, a place to bring the military who are hurt, who are wounded during the fight. It is written in the annals. When it was more or less certain that the Prussians would lay siege to Paris, our mother wanted to make of our convent of the Immaculate Conception a military hospital. She asked to whom it should be offered, and was told that it was to the mayor of Passy, the place where is Auteuil. The sisters took the necessary steps, and Auteuil signed up for 100 beds to accommodate the sick. Then the sisters had to find doctors and nurses who would help them. Eugénie herself wanted this hospital, but she had to leave Paris to be safe and to continue to lead the congregation. And she became displaced, like many other sisters and like many other people in France at that time. But the sisters who stayed in Auteuil, yes, they were open, they were welcoming all these wounded men. I just will tell you two stories. The story of the welcoming of the first wounded man who came. It was on Friday, September 16, 1870. It is written in the annal. "A wounded man is here. He asks to be received in our hospital. A very young soldier, almost a child, who tells me that he was in Sudan at the time of the disasters, that he had escaped so as not to be a prisoner, that he had spent 5 days hidden in the woods, during which he had eaten only green apples that the shepherds had not wanted. I asked him where he was wounded, and he answered that a horse had stepped on his foot and crushed him. I took him to the hospital, put him to bed, and looked at his foot. The big toe was indeed all crushed. I made the bandage that seemed to me to be suitable, and I thought that we could wait until the next day to have the doctor come. In fact, the sisters themselves are the ones who give the care supervised by the doctors. Another story is a story of a man who arrived very hungry. One sister recounts, I saw a poor soldier sitting on the bench in the vestibule who looked very tired. I walked towards him and asked him what he wanted. A cup of soup, he replies. My poor stomach is in bad state. For 14 days I have only eaten turnips found in the fields. Then he told me that he had come from Sedan, that he had escaped from there, not wanting to remain a prisoner, with other soldiers. One day, he says, when they were dying of hunger, they passed in front of a poor farmer's house. They went in and asked for food. They found a woman there with her grandchildren. She brought them bread and said to them, This is all I have in the house. I give it to you willingly, but after this, I will have nothing for my grandchildren nor for myself. You can imagine, sister, he added, that we did not want to take her bread and left it to that poor mother. When he had taken the soup, recounts the sister, I asked him if he would like to eat pork, lamb chops. He answered, With pleasure, sister. I served him. After that, I gave him something else. He ate like a very hungry man. I thought it prudent not to offer him anything more. He might have been unable to find enough to eat. We can see here how close the sisters were of the suffering of their times. From afar, Marie Eugénie is in communion with the sisters. She writes to them. With what emotion I am writing this letter, at a time when our communications are about to be interrupted. Oh, my heart is with you, and how much it costs me to be far away. I see the need for this because of the concerns of the mothers of Lyon, Bordeaux, Nîmes, or the other houses. Finally, it is necessary to suffer and to offer separations and anxieties to God, who receives and counts every sacrifice. May you at least know how much I am with you and bless you all. In fact, the sisters and those who were with them lived the end of this period in difficult conditions. In the end, they will lack everything: food, light, heating, and even the vandalizing of the house. In 1871, the convent was looted, and a student relates in a letter that when she returned to Auteuil, she discovered all what was destroyed. You can see this letter here. Many things are intact, but she finds a Christ that was riddled with bullets, the doors of the cells that were broken down, and she says that she doesn't recognize anymore the place. On April 10, a bomb fell in the refectory, and when she came back, Marie Eugénie herself described the place She said the garden is intact. Only a few trees have been struck by bombs, but there are plenty of them. The grotto, the tent, the greenhouse, everything is intact, except for the statues. That of the grotto is broken, Our Lady of Victory is beheaded. The monastery is hit by shrapnel on the roof, the cells above, the dormitory of the lay sisters, the refectory. Everything is soiled by looting, disorder, the most revolting garbage. Not a cupboard, not a box, not a corner that has not been emptied. Everywhere there are racks, paperback stone, debris of all kinds. Even though the tabernacle has a broken door. Marie-Eugénie will then try to make the list of this furniture that has been destroyed. This is one of our draft to get compensation from the state. She never got it. In this place also has been founded this association, Our Lady of Salvation, an association founded by our Assumptionist brother. Marie-Eugénie encouraged this foundation. At the foot of this statue, the association began in Auteuil. The gap was widening between the popular masses and the church at that time, and Father d'Alzon, Picard, Bailly, Pernay, in their apostolic anguish, felt the urgency of working for the salvation of the people, of the poor, in a perspective of Christian and social regeneration. Marie-Eugénie encouraged them and supports them. With a handful of lay people, she's preparing the foundation of a new work for the Assumptionists. It will be the origin of many works for the working class, oratories, orphanages, circles, pilgrimage. It will even lead to the foundation of the Little Sisters of the Assumption. So, in this rebuilt Auteuil, after the events of 1870, life is going on. Life flourishes again. Until that day in 1888, when Marie-Eugénie returned to the Father, and is buried in this small chapel in the park, in the garden. After her death, not as a consequence, but in this period, begins a difficult period which will lead in the years 90 to the dispersion of the sisters, and in 1925 to the destruction of the big monastery. But that is another story, and I won't tell it today. We now arrive to the end of this story. Throughout this journey, we have been able to note one by one important points for the spirit of the Assumption. I will not mention them again because they will be the object of our sharing during the Zoom meeting now, international Zoom meeting. I have already seen in the chat of the YouTube that we are coming from many places, from sure the United States of America that I greet in a special way, from England, from Belgium, from Mexico, from France, I think, and sure from other places that I don't see on my screen. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here in this talk. Now we are going to meet by Zoom with the link that you have received. See you later in an Assumption International meeting.